There.
So,
Now it says live.
yeah, wonderful. Good to have you back. I'm sorry there was a technical glitch there, and so we're back together. And I'd ask you the next question: what was it like that first week or two after your husband died?
Um, well, we had lots of family around, and I was pretty well taken care of. I stayed at my daughter's, and we did a lot of the planning ahead of time. So that was nice to have that out of the way. There was still things to do. That first week or so was a bit of a whirlwind. I like to organize events, and I look back and realize that his memorial services were events, and we had two of them within the first week. Uh, it, the way that I handled it, I, I'm not sure was the best way, because it was like, now that I know what I'm dealing with, this is what it is, and I'm moving on. And because I knew that it was going to happen, I was going to be alone, and I had lots to do. I had to move from one city to another, and had again we did a lot of moving in in a short amount of time. Um, so that was activity that kept me busy, and planning and making those arrangements were just kept me from really thinking about being alone. I think likely the biggest it, it was likely even a couple of months after, when I bought a new house and moved into a new home, that I had really started to feel that sense of loss. And I couldn't pack up his clothes when I was at our old house. And it was when I opened up the box of clothes when I was unpacking, and that was kind of, I was done for a day or so, because it's like, I don't know what to do with these now. I'm not ready to let him go. Do I hang them in the closet? That seems a little weird. But I hung them in the closet anyway, and because it's kind of like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them, and I took them with me. One of the things that the social worker at the cancer center had said to us, those somewhere in those 5 days that we were on the palliative care ward, was to get back into a routine as quick as possible. And on one hand, I was blessed that I didn't have to get into a routine as fast as possible. And yet that, I think that held me back from a few things, because I really didn't have to do that. Luckily, I had a 2-year-old grandson that lived nearby. My daughter was pregnant and expecting another child. So she thought, bless her heart, it was, she said, it would be nice to have something good to remember about this year, not just about dad passing away, but maybe if we have a new baby, and um, that would just kind of boost everyone else up. And actually, she ended up having a very difficult labor, and we weren't quite sure how that was going to turn out. And that was a scary moment. It wasn't even 6 months after Cal passed away that I was sitting in the hospital, when it finally hit me that I was close to losing my daughter as well. And I just went, oh my goodness. And then I kind of went, that can happen, and pushed that thought away, because it just was too hard to believe that that could happen. So, and the impact of having lost Callum made that even scarier. Um, what was really nice, we took well, a few days anyway, and stayed out at a lake. My daughter and son-in-law and grandson and I, and we stayed at this cabin for 3 or 4 days after both services were over, and just kind of chilled out and relaxed, and took some time for ourselves, and kind of calmed down. I think one thing I didn't expect, both when he was alive and after that, was how much energy it took to deal with insurance companies. And especially when he went on long-term disability, the number of forms, and it took me about 2 or 3 weeks to fill out forms. And just because I couldn't, looking at a form that said expected, you know, to live 1 year or less, seeing that over and over again was very difficult. And then to do that, go through that whole kind of thing afterwards. There's a lot of support needed, I think, for caregivers to help get through some of that time. And I likely should be very grateful for the insurance companies, because I'm sure they hear lots of distraught people, and confused people. You don't think straight. It's a time where you need to be right on top of things, and it's very difficult when you're looking at either somebody passing away within a few months or dealing with that death, and trying to navigate through all of that, especially if there wasn't any pre-work done of gathering papers and gathering numbers and things ahead of time. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of work to getting those things all put in place.
There's a lot of work all around in so many different realms. There's no doubt, and no doubt you're retired, and so on. I'm just wondering if you can just give the kind of précis around. You really developed a huge expertise in caregiving and being a counselor and a coach. I'm just wondering if we can kind of flash out, give you your credentials so that people understand when we go into this next part of the conversation that why you're talking and how you're talking. So.
Oh, well, part of my joke now is that I think I've been a caregiver since I was 3, and as a early school age child, even organized the funeral for a fly for my friends and neighbors. So I never really looked at that as where my start came, but I'm thinking I was likely 6, and just, yeah, I don't know. That's just where I kind of came from. And one of I think the biggest part of my life, as far as my experience impact, was when I was 9. My brother was killed in a car accident, and this was 1970, and like, people didn't talk about those kinds of things, and my family was distraught, and for obvious reasons. And I now look back and think that we didn't know how to care and talk about this, and so I felt really alone. And I think at that moment there was likely a time that I had made a decision that I was going to make sure that people were cared for, and that kind of set the ball rolling. And then within a short amount of time, when I was 11, there was a major house fire. It was an explosion next door to me, and 2 children died, including my brother's best friend. And the year after, grade 6, one of my girlfriends drowned during summer vacation. And in grade 7, my grandfather passed away. So within a matter of 4 years, I lost 5 significant people in my life, and I was 13. So I think that's where my own personal experience and of why I wanted to move forward with this, and why if I was ever to do something like nursing, I said I could work in the ER. I just don't want to get attached to anybody. I want to help people, bring them back, make them whole, and then they're ready to go on their way. And so through that, I've worked with women in a women's shelter, and I felt I was the luckiest one, because I got to work with the kids a lot and help the moms learn how to parent differently, learn what the needs of their children were, and in that counseling realm as well. And I did do some 911 dispatch for 6 years as well, and and then mostly management, supervisory roles, and supporting people who were working with high-risk families, working in mostly parenting and child development, and have done a couple of volunteer stints with the Red Cross. So I was in New York after 9/11, helping with the disaster relief and with some of the BC fires. And so just when there's somebody who's in need, my husband didn't understand that. That was one of the things he couldn't understand about me. When I would see a disaster and I'd go, "Do you know how hard it is for me to sit here and not help?" And he would go, "I have no idea. I have no idea what that's like." And I'm going, "Okay, well, at least I know you have no idea, but um, I have to." I said, "I just have to help." And when we came through the caregiving part, I never thought of myself as a caregiver when he was first diagnosed. I was his wife who was helping him. And that's the story that I hear from most of the people that I talk to now. I'm not a caregiver. I'm his wife. This is what I do. I'm her husband. I'm her daughter. This is just what I do because that's what we're supposed to do. It wasn't until I got into the deeper part of it. And then even after he passed away, taking the step away and looking at, what I'd written in the blog, and then being really strongly encouraged by many people to write the book because they found so much value in the blog that they said, you have to let people know how you did this because you do this so well. And I just naturally help people. That's, yeah, from
That's it.
flies to New York and 9/11. So
Yeah. Yes, yeah, no, it's obviously a passion as well now. I
yeah.
mean, you're so natural at what you've done. And so I'm wondering, as the transition point between, sharing that incredible life story, life experience, you could offer us a reading or a poem or something that speaks to you, just as kind of a break from the story.
Yeah. This is, I'm going to read it from my phone because I'm on vacation and don't have my paper files with me, but thank goodness for technology because I could
Yeah.
just grab it. This is called The Law of Life. And I had made a note that I received this on March 10th, 1999, which would have been, about 2 months after my father passed away. It says, what you give away today or think or say or do will multiply about tenfold and then return to you. It may not come immediately, nor from the obvious source, but law applies unfailingly through some invisible force. Whatever you feel about another, be it love or hate or passion, will surely bounce right back to you in the clear or secret fashion. If you speak about some person a word of praise or two, soon tons of other people will speak kind words to you. Our thoughts are broadcasts of the soul, not secrets of the brain. Kind ones bring us happiness, petty one, untold pain. Giving works as surely reflections in the mirror. If hate you send, hate you'll get back, but loving brings love nearer. Remember as you start this day and duty crowds your mind, that kindness comes so quickly back to those who first are kind. Let that thought and this on direct you through each day. The only things we ever keep are the things we give away. The miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on the green earth in the present moment, to appreciate the peace and beauty that are available now. It is not a matter of faith, it is a matter of practice. And
That's wonderful.
I don't have who to credit that to, so thank you,
Mm,
Anonymous.
mm. Yeah, well, it's powerful and it's true, and toxicity of just that.
Yeah,
But there's
yeah,
also there's a law of the universe here too, right? And
yes.
my personal philosophy is it's tiny acts of kindness that really make a huge difference. And if we put ourselves in that space where we're open and available for what's happening around us, and sometimes it's seeing office buildings burning down, and sometimes it's just somebody walking down the street that needs a little extra hand. And so putting ourselves in that space really makes all the difference. So wonderful, thank you. It's really
Oh,
my philosophy too. Yeah.
you're welcome. In one of the tip sheets that I have on how to get some more peace in your life, one of the things I suggest is just smile. And if you can
Yes.
walk around with a smile, you'll get smiles back. And
Mm,
it's free. It's easy. You can, and if you make yourself smile, you do feel good. You can't
yeah.
smile and not feel good. And it's just practice. Sometimes you might not feel like it, but it it can it can make a difference. And it doesn't have to be, some of my story is can be grand or but it isn't. I just do what I feel called to do, and that's to help and serve. The smile, it just can make such a difference. I was traveling I think it was in July. I had a flight delay, and there was like 45 people in line at the when we landed because they'd missed connecting flights. And this one guy was just absolutely going crazy. And, we know what, this is a horrible company. I'm never flying this company again. And I'm just going to get them to cancel. And he just kind of was going off and off. And, just kind of, just started to talk and just kind of calmed him down. By the time he got to the desk, he was fine. And I mean, I think he likely still drove his home instead of the connecting flight. But he, it's how we choose to respond. And it's not to wear the mask all the time of smiling and pretending nothing's going on. It's choosing, it's that poem about finding peace in the middle of the storm. It can be all around, but you can choose to feel peaceful.
Yes, yeah, and finding meaning and realizing there's always an option. I mean, I guess it's easy for me to say, the next person that you run into, how are you going to treat that person? And it could
Yes.
be the guy who's coming in to clean the hospital room. It could be the CEO of the hospital. It doesn't much matter. I think it's treat with two people the same way, and
Yes.
that's my philosophy in the world. But this, now I'm hoping that we can have talking about some of these issues. So one of the issues there that you're clearly identifying is this idea of how do you share your emotions with your loved one, the loved one who has a cancer diagnosis or terminal illness and so on. And one of the issues is that people want to put on that positive mask. They think, well, my husband's hurting so much, he doesn't want to see my pain, therefore I'll put on this happy mask for him. And I just want you to talk around that issue to start out with, because it's a tricky one in some sense.
Yes, it's very tricky. And a lot of that goes back to what we just talked about intention and choosing your positive thoughts, because it's like riding a double-edged sword, because you want to be honest and upfront. And we were going through our cancer journey the same time as our son-in-law's father was going through treatment. So their house was a little stressed, my daughter and son-in-law, because they both had parents going through cancer treatment at the same time. And they dealt with it different. They decided that they were going to, whatever they were feeling is how they were going to talk with each other. And I don't know how they seem to have that work for them. We stayed more positive most of the time. That was, it was something that my husband he was never going to entertain the thought, likely up until that last 5 weeks, that he wasn't going to live. That he really truly believed that if he didn't, it wasn't denial, it was just I'm going to focus on living because I'm not going to focus on dying. So we did learn some things along the way. Just for I was the researcher, I was the active person. His job was to get healthy. That was his job. My job was to make sure that the doctors did everything that they could to keep him healthy as he could be. And they, in my book, in the foreword in my book, my writing coach had said, you can say that the doctors let you lovingly embrace your caregiving role, which was a very nice way of putting some of the conversations I had with the doctors, because I was going to make sure that he had everything that he could. And I quickly learned that there was no doubt. I didn't catch the doctors doing anything. And they did let me lovingly embrace that role. And we learned some ways around that. And I think what worked first was that it wasn't like we decided on Monday morning, okay, Saturday at 3, we're going to talk about the real stuff. But we would have the real conversations, but they started and they ended. So they had a time, because that is life, and it did need to be dealt with. It was the same with the insurance forms. If I couldn't fill them out, then I did what I could, and then they were set aside. It wasn't something I needed to focus on all the time. And our conversations would usually end up that way. Something would come up, and we'd, if I was into the fear and worry mode, then he would pull me back. He didn't always talk. He was not a talker. He had to think. He had to mull it over. But he listened, even if I didn't think, even when I thought he wasn't, he did listen. With some of the things and so he tried not necessarily some. We stayed away from the eat 6 pounds of asparagus a day and you'll have your cancer cured kinds of tips that we got, because we got lots of those type, and took some and kind of went, well, the worst thing that can happen, infrared sauna was one, which I found through my chiropractor and massage therapist. And it was kind of like, what's the worst thing that can happen? I'm going to feel warm. That's the,
Oh, yeah.
there was no promise that it was going to cure cancer. There was some thought that it might delay spread of cancer, but so some of those things, is it going to really hurt me? Is it going to make it worse? No. Is there a chance it can make me feel better? Yes. So those were the things that he wouldn't necessarily look for himself. I would look for those things, or I would find out about them. Often I would talk to him about it, and then it would be a few days later. I did learn very quickly that that was the best way to do that with him, because the very first time we sat in the doctor's office, I think I asked 2 or 3 questions, and he didn't know that I was going to ask them. And I got the stare of death from him for actually having the gall to ask the doctor a question, and that he didn't know about it. So for him, it was better for us as a couple that I would usually write out my questions. And sometimes I bounce back and forth. I would give him the list of questions and would say, actually, that was later on, because I was a little more subtle to start with. I would just ask him, I go, oh, gee, I wonder about this, or I saw this on the news, even if I spent 3 hours on the internet finding it. And often he would just end up asking the doctor himself, if it was something that was worthy enough, or made sense for how he was feeling. Because that's the thing for the caregiver, is you kind of guess. Like, you see the outside body, but you don't really know what's going on inside. And sometimes it's not as worse. It's not as bad as what it looks like. And sometimes it's not as good as it looks like. And he didn't, like I said, he didn't focus on that stuff at all. So he didn't always tell me what was going on with him. And actually the sauna was the place that I think he did his whatever he needed to do during the day to get rid of the emotions that came up, to deal with his feelings. And I don't know if he was into meditation, but if that's what he would have called it, but I suspect that was part of that time as well. It was a time for him to have alone, and do that. So then after that, as it came on, I just got to where I could give him the list of questions. I'd have them in the notebook. I'd show him the list of questions and say, this is what I want to ask the doctor. And he'd say, yes, yes, no, no, yes, 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 or that one, whatever it was. And like I said, often he ended up asking the questions himself, or he got to the point where he would just say, and Lorna has some questions.
He gave in
And
after a while.
yeah. And usually that was when the oncologist had the door partway open, getting ready to leave, and then he'd shut the door and sit back down, because he knew if I had a couple questions, there was a conversation yet.
Yes. Well, but
So
no, part of what I hear there is that people are quite individual, right?
yeah,
And as the family member slash caregiver, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's best that the person who has the cancer diagnosis kind of lead in terms of what the kind of energy or philosophy of how they're going to approach the cancer diagnosis is. And oftentimes the family member's role is kind of support there. But I just want to reiterate this idea that there are times where it's quite appropriate for the person who doesn't have a diagnosis to be open and authentic, and it actually creates more connection. And I actually don't use the word caregiver very often, because I actually call it family member, because it sounds like caregiver means care is going in one direction, whereas it really is a relationship, and that you're more than a caregiver. Anyway, so there I've spouted off a little bit. Do you want to reflect on some of those ideas? So
yeah, well, if you can find a better word than caregiver, I would love it. I mean, internationally, some are going towards carer, but it gets so confused with paid versus the loved one, and yeah. So that might be part of my mission, is to find the right
word. I call it family member myself.
Yeah.
I mean, really, you say a person whose family member has a cancer diagnosis, but that's very hard to say.
Yeah. it.
What other? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking um, another couple that I know. I mean, he was the one with cancer and going through treatment. He was the one that did all the research. That he was that other personality. His wife was very much in support. He liked to be in control, and he was going to make sure that he had everything that he needed. Now, I mean, they had the same conversations. It's not that what he learned was secret, but he took that, and it is. I think that was the biggest lesson with that decision when Callum decided to go ahead with treatment. When I mean, I begged. I went to the social worker at the cancer center and said, "Look, they said he's dying in 6 months. Why is he working?" And she had a backdoor conversation with the oncologist. And the next meeting, we were in the pretty pink room with the nice little plants. And which I learned is not the room that you want to be in, because that's when they have those tough conversations. and maybe it's not, but that's what happened to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Um,
I hear
but
you.
and the doctor, the oncologist, I knew he was supporting me and going like, "Do you understand how serious this is? Do you know that you're dying? Do you know it's only months? Like, have you thought about maybe taking an early retirement?" And thank goodness he never listened to me. like
Right.
that.
Yeah. And
Um,
again, he's listening to his own intuition, right, as to
yeah,
what's best for him.
yeah.
So.
So that was a big learning, was and a big learning to follow his lead. And yet that brings up that other issue of, what about the rest of the family? Because my daughter was also saying, "I want to spend time with my dad. This is important to me. We lived 5 hours apart." So it's also good to follow the lead, and yet it's that walking the journey together alone piece, supporting him and knowing that that was the best thing for him, and still working within the relationships of other family and some friends, and then our own personal relationship of, but what about, and especially I think in that palliative care, what about me? Like, when, like, do I get a need? Do my needs get there? And how do we have that conversation? And I don't have the perfect solution for that, other than you talk about it, and
Mm.
you figure out where they're coming from. But it's hard to appease everybody. And when you
Yeah.
think, your world is going to end, and and for me, that's what it felt like. My world was
Yeah.
crashing down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it,
Agreed. Yeah, and just I want to keep on kind of that same
yeah.
topic is around the issue of um, taking care of oneself, and the kind of tension that creates is that we are individuals, we have human needs, and at the same time, we really want to take care of the loved one who has a cancer diagnosis. And sometimes I kind of justify it saying, you need to take care of yourself so you can be a better family member to your loved
Hmm.
one and be able to be more supportive and so on. But maybe that's an easier tension to talk about. The other tension is, around the thoughts that we have, like the thoughts, what's my life going to be like after my husband dies? And having that thought, you can feel just even guilty having that thought. So I want you to talk around, in some sense, the permission that we don't talk around these issues. So maybe you can just address it there. So.
Yeah, it's that guilt that comes with having that thought of, what about me? And I had that the day that he was diagnosed. I had that thought for the first time. It was all about, what about him? And then it was like, oh my goodness, what if he dies? And it wasn't terminal at that point, but that what I learned quickly is where the brain goes when you have that news come into your family. And I hadn't thought about that ever, even though it had been around in close parts of my family. I just hadn't ever thought about what people go through at that time. And yet that was quickly squashed. Like, this can't be about me. I'm not the one with cancer. I'm not the one that's going to go through this treatment. I'm not going to be the one that's sick. um, this isn't about me. This is all about him. And that guilt, I mean, that's kind of what led me to the passion test, is that um, I have to be surrounded by something positive. And it I don't know that I think in some ways it continued to bury the guilt. I got to create some good memories around that. With 3 years, we had to make some memories that for those of us left could remember and have, and he had some that he could remember until he passed away, and is likely laughing at us about a few of them now. And but it is, that guilt of and to look after yourself. And for me, being in a new city, we hadn't really built friendships yet. We hadn't, we had acquaintances at work, but nothing close. So we really had each other, and there was a lot of good things about that. But the other part was there wasn't the kind of the cheerleader that could come by and just say, okay, we're going out for a movie, even when he was well enough to go, to either take us out or to give me that break. And it didn't happen until the last few months that he was alive. In a lot of ways, I didn't let it happen. That's not a slight to anyone who tried. I was in control. And because of that, I didn't always look after myself. So, I mean, one of the times I can remember, it was recommended that he get some more exercise. So it's like, okay, well, we're going to do this. We'll get a treadmill. So we got the treadmill, because then I didn't have to worry about finding a gym. I had gone to one gym and ended up, it was one of those circuit gyms. And the first time I was there, I think I followed a lady whose husband had just passed away from cancer. So I spent 30 minutes listening to her story, which was, I guess as it was supposed to be, but it didn't have the same feel, and it wasn't on the way. It was inconvenient. And as he got more sick, I didn't want to spend that time. So we had this treadmill. But I can remember one day going, okay, t-shirt, and then I need shoes. And I wonder what's on TV, or should I put music, and and I was done. Like, it was already too much to think about it. My thoughts were so slow, and it became too much at the end of the day for me to do that. So that, it was a weird experience, but I think that sometimes we get into that realm with the overwhelm, where if somebody was there to just kind of push me along. And my sister did that for me later on. The other part was, after Cal passed away and I went to the dentist, I had a cracked tooth, which is why I went, but I had 3 other cracked teeth that weren't there about a year and a half before. And I had a locked jaw. It took a year of massage from my massage therapist before it released. And that was where my stress was absolute clenching. And I hadn't even noticed it. I wasn't able to, there was days that I couldn't talk right, but I just thought I was grieving. I play flute in a concert band, and I couldn't play properly, but I thought I was grieving, and I'm tired, and I haven't played for 5 years. And when my jaw released, then I could do all these things. So the stress is there, and if we don't look after ourselves, but on my podcast, somebody had said those are the 6 dreaded words every caregiver, take care of yourself, is kind of, I don't know if that's 6, maybe there's a please in there. It's kind of like, that's easy to say, but tell me how, like, show me how. And I think that's part of what I do is show how to do that. My intention initially when I started the Caregivers Lighthouse was to get into more of the actual self part, and to doing some of the meditation and the, who you are, and not losing a part of you. But what I found is that the very first thing to do is to actually look at the situation and help them feel comfortable in moving into that place. The caregivers most involved with caregiving are not wanting to look at anything for themselves until they know that things are okay, and with how they're caring, with what's going on with their loved one, that those issues, and I didn't address those issues to start with, because I made it black and white. Those were practical issues that you can talk to home care about that stuff, or you can talk to your doctor. You can, I'm not that person that's got that expertise. and what I've realized is that I can help facilitate some of those conversations. And once we do that and get some things in place, and sometimes it's just a couple of conversations, and they get to trust that I can help them. Then we can look at self-care. But I'm about self-care. If it is about balancing work, I used to plan my work. I would have things that I would need to read, and I go, okay, there's a test coming up where he's got an MRI. I'm going to be sitting for 2 hours in the waiting room, so I can do this work in the waiting room. And, in partly, I mean, now I look back and thinking I could have listened to a half-hour meditation and then done the work, and that might have helped things I've learned since. But I just learned to maneuver around some of those things, and that works for some people. It won't work for everyone. But the bottom line is we have bills to pay, and especially in cancer treatment, there's for many people more bills to pay. So the answer isn't always leaving work. It is making work for you. Can help. So that the self-care, in the hospital when you're waiting, or even at the cancer center, you can go away to the furthest bathroom. You don't have to go to the closest one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there's,
And we're also individual as well, right? There's no right or wrong way to do this. I hope
no,
people taking
yeah,
that as way as well.
yeah,
But there's times when you're not going to be able to take care of yourself because you have to put yourself
yeah.
into the situation, and other times where there's that opportunity, and I just want to allow people not to feel guilty
Oh, yeah,
about it.
absolutely.
So
No,
yeah,
no.
yeah,
Well, and that's it. Yeah. And I think that's sometimes the message, and I think sometimes in addressing some of the issues and talking about them, because they need to come out, and people, because people want to be aware of them, and they might have a suspicion, or they just aren't paying attention. In your support network, and your own family and friends and colleagues, cancer, lots of people run away just because it's cancer, and that can become even more isolating. But it is, you know, finding a way to look after yourself gets you through it a lot more, and gets you through the other side, whether even when it's not palliative and it's not terminal, when there is just you're into survivorship. That is a whole, we had a little snippet of that time. That's still a different, you're never the same. You don't ever go back to what it was before a cancer diagnosis. So looking after yourself, bringing in the people that can help, uh, in that, and finding out what works.
yeah.
um, you
Wonderful.
know
Yeah,
that
practical and effective, and
Yeah.
understanding yourself and understanding your loved ones, so you make the best of it. I mean, you resonate with so much like practical wisdom. It's wonderful. I'm wondering if we can finish, because you did mention that you do teach a little bit of meditation. Do you want to take us through a few
Oh,
minute segment so we can just set ourselves
it's a
into
little
that
bit of
kind of,
meditation.
yeah, in
Okay.
whatever way is best that you feel would be appropriate.
Um, okay. Sure. I'll do a mini version. I do have a guided relaxation, visualization on my website, so I will kind of blend that with a couple of other things, but do it in a much shorter time. All right. So we just take a couple of deep breaths. And just be comfortable. And we'll do a quick relaxation, starting from the top of your head. And just imagine that your skin is just loose, and every piece of stress is just rolling off. And it's going from the top of your head all the way down your face, your shoulders, your arms. All the stress is melting away through the trunk of your body. The stress is melting away through your legs. And it's all melting away, and it's in a puddle on the ground, and it's just drifting away. And now just imagine a white light coming up through the bottoms of the soles of your feet. And it's filling every cell, every piece of your body, through your calves, up through your knees, up through your thighs, through the trunk of your body. Every cell is full of a white light. It's going through your arms, up through your shoulders and your neck, up through your face, the top of your head. And it's circulating throughout your whole body, this bright white light full of positive energy. And just take a moment and imagine that you're standing in a field surrounded by beautiful flowers, the most beautiful flowers you've ever seen. And you notice one area, one little patch of flowers. It's the perfect flower. It's your favorite flower. And you notice its fragrance. And you are so happy and so grateful to see this field of flowers. And as you walk towards it, you notice a wise being. It might be an angel. It might be a spirit. It might be someone you love. It might be someone who's passed on that you love. It's a wise, wise being. And they call you over. And they say, my dear, you are doing really well. But I'm here to lift your burden. And the wise being takes you over to the stream and walks you into the stream and bathes you and says, as I wash you, all your worry is flowing away. Every fear you have is flowing away. All your cares and concerns are being washed away. And then she extends her hand and says, you can come out now. We've washed away all your worries and cares and concerns, and you're ready to continue on with your day. And she guides you out of the stream, gives you a towel to dry off, and she gives you a big, warm, loving hug and says you have everything you need inside of you. You are strong, you are courageous, and you have everything you need to deal with what you are going to face. And as you give her one last hug and walk back to the field, you stop for a moment and you pick one of your favorite flowers and you look at the color. It might be red or blue or pink, and you take a big smell and it makes you feel warm. It makes you feel happy, and you are fulfilled, and you feel strong and loved. And you take this flower and you keep it, because you can keep this flower, and anytime you need to return to the wise being, to have her wash away all your worries and cares and concerns, all you have to do is get your flower, take a look at it, take a nice big smell of the fragrance, and you will return to the wise being who will be there for you to take away all your cares. And now you can imagine returning to the place that you're sitting or lying, going back into the room and the space where we started. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and return.
That was absolutely lovely. It's hard to talk when you're feeling so relaxed.
Thank you.
But do want to really thank you, Lorna, for sharing your story, sharing your wisdom, sharing your heart, and just I'm sure we could have spoke for hours. I know we just literally scratched such a tiny portion of this. I'll just point people back to your book again, Walking the Journey Together Alone. Caregivers Lighthouse is the name of the website. So bless you for everything that you're doing to help people through extremely difficult times, and the practical and the heartful. So really appreciate that. Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. And, with technology, I help people wherever they are. So they don't have to try to find me anywhere than the caregiverslighthouse.com.
Perfect.
Makes it
Perfect.
easy.
Wonderful to have that coach from a distance. So
Yes.
bless you in your journeys.
Yes.
Thanks again,
Thank you
Lorna.
very much. Thanks,
Take
Rob.
care. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.